Them man there, ain't nothing like them man there. My man, I stand up, give them man chairs. Them man there.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name's, let me go again. My name's Dad. Ladies and gentlemen, keep that. My name is Richard Blackwood, I think. But this is for the Culture TV. Now, I've introduced myself, but to my right, we have the woman that is timeless in age. Right, you know, I think she leaves here and just goes to sleep in a cocoon. The beautiful Michelle Gayle.
Hi guys.
Just looking all kinds of 17.
Always.
Telling you. Then to her right, we have, without doubt, the entrepreneur, the man behind the machine, right? You know, the catalyst from which all derives. Please make some noise for JB Smooth, aka Jason Barrett.
We're in the building.
Nice shirt.
And thank you. Sorry, I thought I'd do something.
Make an effort.
I'd make an effort because today we have a very special guest, someone that is very, very important to me. A lot of the knowledge that I have acquired over the years, I have learned at the feet of some of the greats. And one of our greatest teachers in this country, and I'm not overselling it by saying this, by a long shot, is the gentleman that we've got today, my master teacher, and he has imparted wisdom, knowledge and understanding to many, many, many students across the, I mean, even guys like Carlos trained under him, you know, wow. So exactly. So there's levels to this thing, and this is the top level. Ladies and gentlemen, Robin Walker.
The intro was enough.
So I was like, oh, sorry guys, I just need to get started. I want to get started. Robin, they call you the Black History Man. Yeah, the Black History Man. So first of all, why the Black History Man, and where did you get that title from? Like break that down.
It's what I do. The only problem is that it stereotypes me because everyone thinks all I talk about is the past.
Okay.
And very much when we talk about Black studies, and I also link it to personal development, we also are talking about now and issues that the community will face in the future. So I don't want everyone to think I just talk about what happened several thousand years ago, although that's relevant and that shapes the present. Yeah. I also talk about what's happening right now and, you know, why the Black History Man? It sums up pretty much where my early research went. I started writing books beginning in 1999, and my first book was called Classical Splendor, Roots of Black History. And that same book, when you fatten it up, it became my 2006 book, When We Ruled.
I obviously have When We Ruled, and it's an amazing piece of work. Just talk to us a little bit about some of the research, some of the places that you went, and some of the things that you had to get to actually put into. I mean, it is such a masterpiece, but not just that. It's got so much information in there.
In putting When We Rule together, first of all, it was a lot of fun to do. A lot of people think research is really boring. I love it. I love reading, that kind of thing. I also went to lots of museums as well, which is where I saw a lot of the artifacts. A lot of our history and heritage is in European museums. That blows a lot of people's minds, but it's actually true. A lot of it has been looted. A lot of it has been given as gifts. And the combination of looting and gift giving is why so much of the heritage is dotted across museums. So I went to different museums to see the heritage. I took a trip to Africa to visit some of the Swahili ruined cities. There are ghost towns along the East African coast that Black people built over the last 1,000 years. And I went there armed with a very dangerous object, a camera. And I pointed that dangerous object at these artifacts and did this. Now you may think, well, isn't that an obvious thing to do? Most people who've been to Kenya, they don't have any of these photographs. And it's like, well, what did you go there for? And they went there to look at zebras and lions and tigers. And they didn't go there to look at any heritage. And my thing was get that kind of thing documented.
Which is interesting because you always think of African ancient history as Egypt. little bit of Libya. You don't really think of Kenya, so that's new to me because Egypt. Egypt's one of the places that I was always obsessed with as a kid. So it's like literally, as I earned money, it's one of the first places I really went and explored and was quite obsessed with it. But I wasn't aware of Kenya having ancient history still in existence at all.
Well,
Egypt
one
is
of
just historic
the
buildings anyway.
yeah, one of the freakiest experiences was we visited a city called Lamu, which is just off the coast of Kenya, and Lamu is still a living medieval city. It's like stepping back in time, and you're walking through these very narrow, walkways, and you've got these 3- and 4-story houses either side of you, lived in by black people, and black children are coming out to play and that kind of thing. And you're looking around at this kind of medieval heritage. And the drains next to the houses, yes, I said it, drains. You can still see them. They're still there, they're still live. The doors with their brass bosses, designs and their central pieces, and all their ornateness and grandness are still there.
Wow.
This is in Kenya.
This is in Kenya.
This is what I'm trying to say.
That's the point.
No, that's what I mean.
No, because it sounds like you're describing old England right now.
That's the point. But here's the thing, you see, this is the reason why I do what I do.
Okay.
Because right now your interest is like, damn.
Yeah,
You need
yeah,
to
of
go
course.
there.
Right.
No, I would go there.
That's the point. And the whole point of when it comes to history and heritage, there's a lot of stuff in Africa that's like that. But what it is no one's flagging it up because unfortunately the zebras and the elephants and the lions.
President.
There it is. They've got the whole stage to themselves.
But you've just sold Kenya to me now because people have suggested going to Kenya, and literally that's what I think. Well, to go and see zebra, like to
I
safari.
always wanted to go for the safari. That
Did
was
you?
I get
No, I
now I
didn't
feel
even-
I feel like I've
Safari
cheated
wasn't
myself.
enough.
Like I was going to see the safari and not realise that.
This is more what I
What's
did.
really going on?
Yeah,
Now
what's
I
really
know I
going
can
on?
see that as well. Then I would go to Kenya because it's like the mix of the safari and the history.
Maybe I'm being a bit too conspiratorial in my view, but is there another reason as to why they hide these things? Like, does it go against what they try to stereotype as being African?
Yes, it does. It does. And again, this is why I do what I do, because my thing is presenting our history in a respectful and dignified way. So few people have done it. And in Britain, the last person that went this way, there was a white scholar, Dr. Basil Davidson. And he wrote a series of books in the late 50s, the 1960s, the 70s. And he did a TV series in 1984 called Africa, and it was an 8-part series. Brilliant stuff, but that was where the research was at then. And since him, the only person who's really going there and going hard is, in terms of putting the stuff out in book form, I've got the game to myself, which is a good place to be.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
But it means that if anybody else wants to get in on the game,
they've got to come to you.
or I'm the only other person, the only other competitor. One of the reasons why I do what I do is to encourage other black people who think that their heritage is worth investigating, presenting, and bigging up.
So why? Obviously, what you've just said is fascinating. This is just one small kind of facet to.
Yeah.
Why is it that you find that black people are not interested in finding out? Because the reason why I say this is that everybody on the internet, social media, wants to claim that they're woke, right? Everybody wants to claim, like, have you, I had a friend that me and Jason always joke about it. She said to me, we was talking, and she goes, do you know about the Anunnaki? Right?
The what?
Anunnaki.
The Anunnaki.
Right.
Anunnaki.
Long story.
And I was like, please enlighten me. She was like, but she, just the mere fact that I said that, felt like she looked down on me like, you're doing so well, but yet you don't know about the Anunnaki. So I then said it to Jason, and Jason goes, you know what, B, right? You got all these people that reckon they're historians, but all they've done is they've read little segments off the internet and then they reckon they know everything, right? And it feels like what you've just said reinforces that, because there are so many people that would probably watch this that would like to claim that they know this part of Kenya, but never knew. Right? Do you know what I mean? The so-called woke people, and it's like, why is this the first time that we're hearing this? Why are there not other black men or women out there that are documenting things like this? Besides, you should not have this game to yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
You know, like as much as we congratulate you for being a person that's within it, that's opening people's eyes, you should be one of many, right? You know. So then I ask you, who was your motivation? Who was your mentor? Because it seems like there was no one before you.
No, there were, but what they didn't do was put pen to paper. That's what they didn't do.
Okay.
Okay, so I studied with a gentleman called Kenny Bakey, and he studied with another gentleman, Dr. Femi Biko, who is a very brilliant academic. Big love to Dr. Biko. If he's watching this, you know, big love Biko. Another gentleman, Dr. Cecil Gutsmore, I think, who Femi studied with.
Okay.
What these people didn't do, they didn't put pen to paper. They were teachers, they were lecturers. They were compiling a lot of the same stuff that I now do, but because they didn't put pen to paper, then ultimately they would have pointed people to Dr. Basil Davidson. They would have pointed people to other sources. You had African Americans like John Jackson, African Americans like Chancellor Williams. People will point you to these people too. Big respect to those scholars. But these scholars were writing in 1970, 1971. No one's really updated that research. And again, this is where I fit in, because that's what I've done.
You touched on a really important point there, because a lot of the black history stuff and a lot of the black heroes from history, it's always America. Even in Britain, Britain has got a rich history of, especially, you know, after Windrush and the impact that...
Even before Windrush.
And before, that's right. And so why is it that, and I say why is it like, but why is it always the Americans? Why do we not know more about black British history?
In truth, we're back to the same kind of problem. If we were to look at Black Britain, we could look at the last 70 years of Windrush. And it's a powerful story.
Very.
But you have to know it to know it's a powerful story. Me and some colleagues, including your cousin, we did a book, Black British History, Black Influences on British Culture, 1948 to 2016. We didn't know where the research was going to end up. But when the package finally came together, we were looking it over, it's like, damn, that's a powerful story. Because Black Britain has had a civil rights struggle too. Now, it's not as extensive as the African American struggle, but we have a struggle. And the result is, one of the reasons why so many black people outside of Britain want to come to Britain, and they'd rather be here than in Calais, or here than in Berlin, is precisely because Black Britain has had a political struggle. And not only a political struggle, a cultural one. So if you look at the influences that Black Britain has had, at least 5 white youth subcultures have their origins in Black British culture. So you've got the mods, you've got the skinheads, you've got the punks, you've got the two-tone heads, and you've got the chavs.
Wow.
And so we've impacted on working class culture. We've also impacted on intellectual and high culture. You know that, does the name Lubena Hibbin mean anything to you? She's the 3rd black person to win the Turner Prize in art. The 3rd.
Yeah, because I knew about Steve
McQueen.
And of course,
Chris O'Philly.
Chris O'Philly. But I didn't know about...
Lubena Hibbin, yeah, she's the most recent winner of that. Then you've got the amount of black people that won things like Man Booker Prizes. You know, there's a guy that won it for A Brief History of 7 Killings.
Yeah, that's right, I've got that. Marlon Thomas, is it? Marlon? I can't remember his name. I've got the book. Yeah, so
it's a situation where high and low culture, and then you've got the impact that we've had on, even European classical music. You've now got the Chineke Orchestra, you've got Sheku Kanamason, the Kanamason family, who are tearing up the game.
They are really killing the game.
Yeah.
So can I ask you, I know this might sound like a very, I don't know if it sounds like a very silly question, but how did that take place? Because okay, I'm 46, so I remember. I'm old enough to remember.
You're 46.
Yeah.
Oh,
Thank
okay.
you. Thank you. I'll take that.
No, respect, bro. Respect.
Thank you. God bless. Thank you. Right. But I'm old enough. I was, growing up in the 70s to remember punk, right? To remember like Toya Wilcox and that kind of era, and Quadrophenia and that kind of blah blah. But also understanding that ska music definitely had played a big part with the Specials, Bad Manners, and those kind of groups, and blah blah, Funboy Free and all that kind of stuff, Bananarama. And it seemed like, especially in the 70s and 80s, it seemed like there was a time of real acceptance, because I remember we used to have on channel, I want to say BBC, I don't even think Channel 4 was around then, but we had No Problem would come on first, then they would have Reggae Sunsplash.
Yeah.
This was on terrestrial TV, one after the other, right, and that was like a Friday night, right, so most black people stayed in their house, watched No Problem, right, and then watched, which went for a number of seasons, and then watched...
No Problem was the first Channel 4 sitcom.
Channel 4, there you go.
See, I
The
didn't
first,
realise
not
that.
one of the first.
Oh, it was the first?
The first, yeah.
Wow. You see, and that's what I'm saying. Like, so there you go. So imagine that started off Channel 4, and as I say, straight afterwards would be Reggae Sunsplash, and that's how I knew, being a descendant of Jamaica, about people like Eka Mouse and stuff, because I knew of them from watching Reggae Sunsplash and then speaking about it. So I got to learn about my culture in depth, right? Be it, the story of a black British Jamaican descendants living in No Problem, and then seeing the dance hall or early reggae in Reggae Sunsplash. The question I'm trying to get to is, how is it that we was able to get that over here, but yet you have Africans that have their history in France or whatever, but they don't seem to have the same, does it make sense?
I see the point. We would need to do a comparative study.
Okay.
We would need to look at what are the factors that made the Black French story different
Okay, yeah.
to the Black British story. But certainly one of the big differences was that Black Britain has been able to sell its popular culture to white Britain in ways that white Britain think it's cool to jump on it.
Yes.
Understood.
Yeah.
So for example, when the ska thing started, the mods thought that's cool, we'll jump on that.
Yes.
Right.
And then you had the proximity of black people and the mods living in the same area. So the mods would come to our house parties, the ones with the big speakers and the whole thing was shaking. And a lot of the mods will reminisce about, they used to go to them things, and that's where they heard ska blasting out loud.
Yeah.
And then you then hear the skinheads talking about how they got into our music and culture.
That's right.
Because the skinheads were the people living next door to black people. And some of them will explain that they grew up hearing Trinidadian and Jamaican music all the time, because that was be blaring through the walls.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether France has that kind of history or not.
Yeah.
So this is so interesting, because a lot of people, if you say mods, if you say skinheads, think racist, think NF, think far right. And so you're saying that the originals were actually heavily influenced by Caribbean culture.
Yeah, but you could still be influenced by and still be racist.
racist,
I mean, that's the...
There is that, but the skinhead movement has since split. And one group have made it quite clear, do not associate us with Nazis. They call themselves sharps.
Yeah.
Right.
Skinheads against racial prejudice.
Okay.
And they're the ones that have got, ska tattooed over themselves.
Right.
They're the ones that they wear the sharp patch to make it quite clear, don't mix us up with any of that kind of
Nonsense.
The National Front, as it was called back then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you will get, I mean, there was something I downloaded and showed to some of my students. The skinhead anthem.
Which one?
I want all you skinheads to get up on your feet, put your braces together and your boots on your feet. The guy that did it was called Roy Ellis. His other name is Cy Marip, and it's called Skinhead Moonstomp.
Okay.
He's still around, and he still performs for skinheads. So you've got all these kind of Essex skinheads and he's the only black guy in the house, chanting those lyrics, and they all know
So
it.
mad. Yeah.
Wow.
And they're all, and you will get kind of the generations, because their culture is generational. 9-year-old boys with the braces and the pork pie hats, and they're still skanking.
Doing their thing.
So do you believe in multiculturalism? Do you believe in sharing everything that we have culturally so that we kind of assimilate as one? Or do you believe in being quite specific culturally and saying, this is us, box that off, and yeah, sure, you can listen, but this is who we are, and to make that really, really strong and definite?
Yeah, but for me, I'm both. One of the things about being a minority in what's become somebody else's country is, is a good idea that they like you.
Yeah.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
All you need to do is just look at the numbers.
Well, just look at history, right? The Native Americans.
Right, yeah. So it's
What
a good
happened
idea
to
to...
them?
They weren't liked.
They weren't liked.
They
Yeah.
weren't liked.
Yeah, they were not liked.
And if our culture can help get liked, obviously you then end up with the problem of appropriation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And that problem, I don't know how you lick that, because if you were to look at, again, we talked about the two-tone bands. If you were to do a graph of how many black people were in the band and how successful the band was,
Yeah.
all right, the graph will look like this.
Yeah. The more white,
yeah.
the more successful, right?
Right, and then so you can then plot it. The most successful, madness.
Yeah.
The second most successful, bad manners.
Yeah.
Bad manners, I think, had one black guy in it.
Yeah. But look how famous let's think of how massive UB40 were also.
UB40 was going, they was doing Reggae Sunsplash in Jamaica
Right.
as headline.
Yeah, but UB40 weren't just massive in Jamaica, they were a global
Absolutely.
success.
Right, and then when you get to the nearly all black, the Selector,
Yeah.
they were the least.
Yeah.
Aswad actually had to go commercial. Remember
Yeah.
with what was the tune?
Don't turn around.
That's like big up Brinsley and everybody, but like, I
But
know.
it has to be said, that was a joke tune, right? That was a joke tune.
The weirdest thing.
I don't want to say that.
No, you loved it, innit?
I don't want to say. I'm not going to say I loved it. I don't want to say it's a joke tune. I think it was a matter of commerce. It's a matter of survival, paying
You
bills.
know what it was? I remember hearing that and then going, African children. I was like, the two are not the same.
No, but Eddie Grant did the same.
Yeah, it's true.
I was like, where is the drum? Where is the drum? Give me the drum at least.
That's right.
Right? No
But
bass
Maxi
guitar.
Priest had to
Nothing.
do
I'm really
it.
hurt by
Maxi
this.
Priest had to do it.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, of course. Eddie Grant had to do it, and they became very successful by.
You have to eat.
Look, I mean, and that's a good point, though. That's a good point, because I've heard you say before that the difference is because we're in this country, the kind of census of the country is sort of, we're about 1 million, maybe 1.2 million.
Three.
Oh, 3 million. Okay,
Yeah.
so we're
but
moving forward.
that's what they call, they divide this up into black Caribbeans, black Africans, and black other. Black other will be the sprinkling of African Americans, but also a huge proportion of mixed.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And then
so
when you add that together, we get nearly 3 million.
3 million in a country of roughly
60
million. So at that point, we are not a nation, we are an ethnic group.
That's right, that's right.
Which is something very different to what the African Americans have.
They're a nation.
They're a nation.
Because they're so huge, and they can make so much more difference by galvanizing themselves.
Because economically, they
Exactly.
have a say. As much as we don't economically, I don't believe we have so much of the say. I don't think that we.
Well, we're just such a small proportion. But when Martin Luther King said, "Don't ride the buses," that had a massive
Of course.
impact
Well,
on
okay,
that bus
right,
company.
okay, so then this is the thing, because getting back to black US history, black UK history, we had a bus boycott here,
Yeah,
but
in
not many
Bristol,
people
right?
in Bristol,
Yeah.
right? But not many people know about the Bristol bus boycott.
And the reputation of the person that led it, Dr. Paul Stevenson, we should be speaking of him
Yeah,
in
we
the same
should.
way as the African Americans
right.
are speaking of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and we're not. And so if you're watching this, Dr. Stevenson,
Thank you.
we bigging you up here.
Yeah,
We're bigging
thank you.
up here.
Salute.
For the culture, yep. It's easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the thing being is, I don't know, but I don't think Black France has produced that. I don't think Black Germany's produced that.
It's slightly different because what the French say to me or even when I go to St. Lucia, to be honest, because France nearly won St. Lucia, they always say, we wish the French had won, because they said at least it'd be French citizens. Like in St. Lucia, you've still got to write a letter to come here, prove that someone's keeping you and you're going to be sent back in 6 months' time. In France, you're a French citizen. You're free to come and go.
It's really weird, that.
So it's slightly different impact in that sense because they are French. And that's why the French are very keen to say that French team, when everyone's going, a nation of immigrants, they're like, no, they're not immigrants. They're French.
Interesting.
When I went to Guadeloupe the other day, and it was interesting because I've only frequented a small amount of the Caribbean. But it was the first time I was saying to you off camera that I saw white police. I've never seen white police
in the
Caribbean as a dominant force. I can actually categorically say to you that I saw, my 8 days I was there, I saw maybe about 10 different policemen. Not one of them was black, and it wasn't the same person I was seeing, right? Which told me that, and it was so weird because that told me that I don't know. I mean, maybe you could tell me more. That there must be a heavy influx of French money in this country that they're making sure that they protect everything, because I've never seen that before. I've never seen a black country that's not necessarily governed to a degree by its own. Is there any truth in that? Or
no, you spotted something profound. Basically, the extent to which France controlled its ex-colonies, in terms of ideology and in terms of practice, was stricter than how Britain controlled its.
Okay.
In other words, as you say, there are black people in French colonies who really do think they're French.
Yeah.
Yes.
Whereas black people in the British colonies, we thought we were British until we came here. Got that. And then we woke up. Whereas in the French colonies, that didn't necessarily, it didn't go down like that.
Well, you just hit a point, because I guess I couldn't word it correctly, but the time I was there, outside of the police being white, you could tell that the black people there didn't even seem Caribbean, if that made sense.
They're
That's it. 100% French. It was like, I know this might sound very stereotypical, but I wanted to hear a French accent, but with a twang of something that told me you're from the Caribbean, if that made sense. Like, you know, when you go to Jamaica or you go to other parts of the Caribbean where there are white people, right? And you look at them and you go, okay, you're going to speak a certain way, but they speak English, but they speak with the twang where you go, okay, it's of that country. But when I was in Guadeloupe, everybody just sounded French. There was nothing. If you heard two people and your eyes were closed, and one was from Paris and one was from, let's say, I can't think of a town. Right. You'd think they were the same. You couldn't hear.
But the thing is, they are still very proud. Like the French Caribbean friends that I have and the French, like African friends that I have, they always say, I'm French, but I'm African. They always make that very clear, because they've still got a strong identity with Togo, or there are countries in Africa that they're from, Cote d'Ivoire, whatever. But of course, they have, it's like this mix. It's so weird because they have this kind of finesse of the French, and like they pick the best bits of that, but they still say, I'm very African. You still go, they cook very African food. And even my friend, she's African descent, but her husband was from Guadeloupe.
Yeah.
She made sure she learned how to cook the Caribbean way and everything. So they do have their food and their culture. It's just harder to differentiate, I think, because a Jamaican is so Jamaican. Like, a Jamaican, but sometimes someone just walks in the room and they're Jamaican. Do you know what I mean? We have such a strong sense of identity. I think it's a bit harder to tell.
I think we don't want to give that up as well. I find that Jamaicans, I'm not saying that French they don't, because they want to obviously hold their identity as well, but I find even descendants of Jamaicans, the ones that maybe were born here, I include myself, I'm overly proud. And I don't know if that's taught, but I'm overly proud. There's being proud of your nation. Like, I'm proud to be British.
Of course.
But I'm overly proud.
Of course.
Of the Jamaican heritage.
You're a historian, so you would know. Is that something that we're taught, like, subconsciously?
I don't know. I mean, what it is that Jamaica does have a lot to be proud of.
Okay.
Which does make a difference.
For such a small nation, right?
Yeah.
What's
In other words, Jamaica's punches way above its weight.
Yeah.
Okay, understood.
Way, not just slightly.
Yeah.
But, we were having a joke about Trinis. So do they.
Yes, yeah.
They punch way
Yeah.
above. So if you were to look at a lot of black people of the 20th century, famous ones, important ones, a huge disproportionate number come from the Caribbean, full stop.
Yes.
You know, most people present Caribbean as a backwater. It's not. Yeah. We've produced a Marcus Garvey. We've produced a Stokely Carmichael.
Yeah.
We've produced, you know, the list is long. I mean, even people like Minister Farrakhan.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
And Colin Powell, wasn't he?
And Colin Powell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a long list. But what happens with Jamaica, because of the impact that two things really, music and religion. The fact that, you know, the whole Rastafari thing has gone all over the world. And it's done it unlike of the way, you know, most religions have basically murdered their way around
Absolutely.
the world. Rastafari hasn't done that.
No, it hasn't.
Yeah, it's true.
Hasn't
It's always
killed
been about
anyone.
peace.
That's a
It's
very
true.
good point.
It's very, very true.
Yeah.
From
Very
Haile
good
Selassie,
point.
like,
Just
yeah.
come in peace.
Yeah, and people, as one Rasta put it, you know, it's the fastest growing livity on the planet. And it's done it because people like the livity.
Yeah.
And then that, together with reggae, has put together a very, very strong Jamaican brand. But even without that, Jamaica still punches, you know, heavy and hard. And so Trinidad has done pretty much the same thing as well. So there's lots to be proud of. Whereas for some places, it's harder to do it when you can't point to anybody.
Yeah. Very good
Absolutely.
point.
Because that,
Very good point.
And you could help me with this as well. You know, historically, we've been taught that, you know, some slaves that couldn't be controlled were sent to Jamaica, right? Do you?
I don't believe that. I've heard it too.
Okay, yeah.
I've heard
Well,
it too.
actually, it's a good.
Is that true?
I don't believe it. That sounds like, you know...
A Jamaican mythology.
Jamaicans bigging up themselves.
Which is a very Jamaican thing to do.
Yeah.
We're going to dispel that.
So there's no history. There's no. Jamaicans are
I know
like
he's my
that.
teacher. You don't know what he's talking about.
No, listen, because Jamaicans really pride themselves on this, right? Because my dad's Jamaican, I'm mixed. My mum's Grenadian, my dad's Jamaican. But Jamaicans really do pride themselves on all the runaway slaves were sent to Jamaica, so we're a nation of strength because we had the most disobedient slaves and the rebellious were put in Jamaica, and that's made us such a strong people. So it's in our DNA. So you're saying there's no actual proof of that?
No, here's a point.
No record
here's
or
a point.
proof of-
It's possible that there is such a record.
Okay.
Just I haven't seen it.
Right.
This is what we can definitely point to. Very specific slave rebellions in Jamaica.
By the Maroons.
Yeah, you can point to different things. Places like Barbados, there's a lot less. But
Okay.
then the geography of Barbados doesn't suit that.
Such a flat
You
country.
have to take the whole island or nothing.
Yeah.
And the Bajan posse tried to take the whole island. They tried to do it on several. No, they tried it in 1649. They tried it in 1676. And eventually, when they hit bullseye, it was 1816. There was something
Okay.
called the Bassa Rebellion.
Okay.
So Jamaica was favourable in the sense that you've got, you know, the landscape is like
it's
this.
different, yeah.
So once you've got peaks, you can then hide out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And some places don't have that
Yeah,
kind of
Barbados
geography.
is very flat, isn't it?
But other places have got maroons that were never recaptured. Guyana had maroons that were never captured.
Okay.
The United States had maroons that were never captured.
No, I had never heard of that.
And you had one of the maroon communities in the United States was mixed with Native Americans. They were
Wow.
called the Seminole Indian Nation. They were never captured. They became a part of Florida in the 20th century by choosing to become a part of Florida.
Yeah, their choice.
Wow.
Right? So in other words, so when people want to big up the Jamaican team, my thing is big up everybody.
Yeah.
And the most impressive maroon society that blacks ever built in the Western Hemisphere was in Brazil. It was called the Republic do Palmares. Palmares was almost like an African state had been transported to Brazil. The way the constitution, how it was set up, it's a model example, and it lasted for 100 years.
Oh, wow.
They were originally eventually captured and destroyed, but they had a 100-year history of an all-black, you can't even call it a kingdom, an all-black empire in Brazil of runaway slaves.
Wow. And what sort of numbers did that get to?
We don't know. The books say 30,000,
Okay.
but I don't believe that because you then do the calculations and it seems that its capital city was 30,000.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then you then look at what would be the rest of the population.
Yeah.
Then you've got the people that would run away, and 30 years later, there's going to be another generation.
Yes, of
because
course.
people are going to marry. Does that make sense?
Yes,
and that
of
would then boost your numbers, boost your numbers, boost your numbers.
I was going to ask, once again, I always put my hand up if it sounds like a silly question. I remember many moons ago I had a discussion with a young lady that I went out with for many years. And she said to me, soon enough you'll find that there will not be a race of just black and white anymore. It will be everybody mixed, everybody, because that's where
it's going.
So I was going to ask you, do you believe that to be the case?
No.
I can't see that happening.
No.
Africa's huge. The population of Africa alone, and the reproduction in the continent of Africa, I would say, compared to Europe, there's a massive disparity, isn't there?
There is that, but there's other issues too. You can have a mixed population. You can. But the problem is if we look throughout history, you don't have to look at how do Europeans treat mixed populations, and usually they will do some form of ethnic cleansing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that you can have a population that's mixed, but then they'll clean that population out, and then it will be back to what it was before. And there's an example of it.
Okay.
What's the example? Spain, okay.
Spain was ruled by Africans and Arabs for 700 years during the Middle Ages.
Is this from Hannibal on?
No, it starts with a guy called Tariq Ibn Ziyad.
Okay.
He was the governor of Mauritania, the land of the Moors.
Yes.
Right.
And what happens is that he is invited by his Arab overlord to lead an invasion into Spain, and that invasion takes place in 711 AD.
Okay.
And then when people talk about the Moors in Spain, it's the period that comes immediately after this.
Okay.
All right, so what you then end up with, you end up with 4 dynasties ruling in Spain. The first dynasty is called the Umayyads, and they're of mixed African-Arab descent. So we can claim it, the Arabs can claim it.
Yeah.
The second dynasty is purely African. They're from Senegal.
Okay.
The third dynasty is a black Moroccan dynasty called the El Mahadis, the black Moroccans. They rule for the third dynasty. And then the fourth dynasty, the Nazarids, are Arabs.
Right.
But they intermarry with us, and by the time we get to their last king, he's black.
Okay.
Okay.
Right? So that period is where you start getting cities like Granada, Cordova, Seville. And if you go to these Spanish cities, the stuff that Africans and Arabs built is still there. You can still see these things.
So I've always wondered that, because sometimes you see the architecture, like, wow, okay.
So yeah, if black people want to see the heights from which we've fallen, you need to see some of that stuff. Now, as I said, it's Arabs and Africans. So in other words, some of that stuff is Arab, but some of it is definitely African.
And what happened? How did they get wiped out?
Well, that's the thing, you see. They lost power in 1492. Their last king, the Europeans call him Boabdil. His Arab African name, whatever, would be Abu Abdallah. He loses power in 1492. He's exiled, and his mum cusses him out. You weak son of a what's it?
Yeah.
And the Spaniards reenact this.
Oh wow.
They reenact this, and they always have black puppets representing the king and his mother.
Right.
Oh wow.
Yeah, they reenact this. Anyway, cut a long story short. You lose power, you're still 3 million black and mixed race people still living in Spain. That didn't go entirely unnoticed. That did not go unnoticed. And so what happened was you had various Spanish and Portuguese kings and queens that decided, right, you guys,
Time to go.
And you had basically, they cleaned them out.
Wow.
Did that happen in Argentina? Because they always say...
That's a different story, but same thing happened.
Because they always say there are literally no black. It's the only... South America, there's always a black population, except Argentina.
Is that true?
Yeah, it's true, absolutely true. You know the tango?
Yeah.
You know that was invented by black Argentinians.
No.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's a black dance. It's an African-derived dance.
Right.
Yeah, the original was called the tangura, which is where we get the word tango from. Yeah, so what you'd end up is, by the time you get to round about kind of 1880 and so on, you might end up with people with black grandmothers, but the population is just getting lighter and lighter. And there are some stories I've heard. I can't confirm them, but that when Argentina has got into political battles, there was policies to put black troops in the front line and that kind of thing.
them out.
Yeah, yeah.
So we bring it forward to now, and some of the crises that we find the state of the black nation or the black ethnic group in the UK, and things like gun crime, things like knife crime, that seem to exclusively, and I know people always like to say, oh, you know, black on black crime, but, you know, Asian people and have crime with Asian people, and white people have crime with white people. And my thing is, but that's not our business. You know, we need to kind of focus on what's happening with our youth. And you know, and so where do you think it's coming from? And obviously, I'm not going to say what are the solutions, but what direction do we need to be moving from an educational perspective to kind of address some of these issues?
The first thing I think is we're going to have our own kind of commissions on exactly what is going on. And I mean exactly. Where we try and do our own research into precisely where the knife and gun crime and the black economy, the drugs, where that all fits in, and who's hooked up with who to make those kind of things happen. I don't think we've had those kinds of discussions. So a lot of us think it's things like broken families, single parent, female-headed households, no fathers in the family. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And whereas that might be some of the problem,
It can't be all of it.
yeah, and you then find out that some people really did have fathers. You know,
Yeah.
So they did.
Yeah.
They did.
Yeah.
You know, so we need to do some serious research of our own into that. The next thing, of course, we have to look at is the changes in the code of honor.
Right. What do you mean?
Back in the day, I could beef with you, but it's me and you. Ain't got nothing to do with nobody else. No one's calling up man's dem, quote unquote. It's me and you. And if I have to bring other people involved, that's a loss of honor
Right.
to me.
That weakens you.
Yeah, where did that honor go? Why is it that everyone has to call up 15 man's dem? What's that about? And when did we stop calling that out and making it quite clear, you know, if you have to call man's dem to deal with your problem, you are
You're weak.
Do you know
whatever
something?
words.
No,
Fits in.
you know what? I used to do this in my stand-up, and it's so prevalent to what you just said, that even in our generation, if you go back to the 80s when we were, I guess, like teenagers or bordering teenagers or whatever,
for me, but yeah.
right? But like, so by the time 1985, I was what, 13, right? 1986, and I remember that if you, and I did it in my stand-up, if you see a guy and he's looking at you, you would tap your bedroom and go, look at my man looking at us. And us would straight away, we go, yeah, who's he looking at? And then we would move to him. But back in the day, those words didn't have the same, it didn't work. Because you say, look at my man looking at us. And my man would go, no, bro, he's looking at you. So you go and deal with him.
Yeah.
I'll watch, I'll make sure no one else jumps in. But you go, and you had to, so it was a time where the reason why, I say this is the reason why the problem has now derived, is that if you was a fighter back then, number one, it's because you earned it, you earned that stripe. But two, if you wasn't a fighter, you was also cool, because everybody was cool with playing their lane. If you wasn't that guy, guys that were fighters, number one, wouldn't pick on you because they understood that there was no honor in that. If I moved to you and I beat you up, the next fight is going to go, but that's like you, it makes no sense. He can't fight. So you get no stripes for that.
But I don't even like I'm the only female here now. I don't even like that talk of what was the best way to fight and what was. I just think there's a lot of toxic masculinity within the black community that we do not address properly. And what we feel is being a man in the black community and defines being a man.
Sorry to cut you. Could you bring that point up again in about 5 minutes? Because the whole toxic thing needs a whole discussion just by itself. And also, because if you bring it into this, it's gonna not go
where it should go.
Right.
Yeah. And even adding to that, what I'm saying is even though I hear what you're saying, but you got to understand, as men, alpha male or as male, we will born to protect, right? And not just our women, but even our fellow brothers, right? You know, so you had, you know, I wasn't necessarily the fighter, but let's say my cousins that would be like, he's good. If he walks down this street, you guys, the predators, cannot touch him, or you're touching me. And they'll go, oh, that's cool, right? Do you know what I mean? So let's say maybe the guys in class that were more the boffins or the people that, it's like, he stands a chance, right? Do you know what I mean?
By being protected by the alpha
so
male.
therefore, he gets a pass, but me and you can go all day long. Now, when you see these young kids, they're attacking the kids that are in their books. That, like, you know, you always
Makes
hear
no
about
sense, right?
these kids that are like, you know, you can look
they're
at
not even
them.
a part of
they're
it.
not
They're
a part
not-
of it,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And what's happening is, and so there's been a breakdown because, like when you started off by saying about the honour, there was no honour in that. Even when we, you know, like the English like to big up the craze and like, you know, we were talking about this in previous episodes. But one of the reasons why the British would big these guys up is they'd always say they wouldn't attack anybody else but those people that were doing what they was doing, right? Do you know what I mean? If you was involved in that crime, but they see us, they were so polite, you would never know, right? But it was an old school thing, and I think what's happened is there's been a breakdown. I'm sure you can explain it much better than I can, but there's been such a breakdown now, especially within our community, where honour doesn't matter no more, right? The ideology of but there's no honour in that. A man will now come back, his rebuttal will be like, I don't business, man's got to do what man's got to do. And it's like, but it's not you just doing it. Now it's, like you say, the masses attacking one person and then congratulating yourself on the fact that that one person that you fought couldn't fight you all back. Right? You see the way that we beat him down, it's like, well...
Of course you did.
Of course you did.
15 of you and one of him.
Not unless he's Superman. Like, what did you expect? Right? Whereas in my timeline, I can remember if something like that happened, probably an older would come and slap us all up, like say, wait a minute, you all were attacking this one person. Right, do you know what I mean? And we would be embarrassed for the fact that maybe we was even caught.
So what do you think? What would you think?
So I don't know what the trigger was from the old situation to the present situation. I know when it happened.
Yes.
It coincides with the jungle years. I mean, no disrespect to the Junglist posse, but that's when that rubbish kicked in. That's when the whole postcode thing kicked in.
Wow.
Yeah, if you think about it, before that, there was no such thing as a postcode.
No,
Very true. You know? Very true. You remember when we was kids,
true.
right? We could go
We went everywhere. I used to go
and Jungle came
Carlston.
in.
We used to go Elephant and Castle all the time. We used to go across Brixton.
Even Carnival.
We used to go,
Carnival, like, it didn't matter. No one would say, bruv, what ends you from?
Yeah, no, I agree.
Right, do you know what I mean? Like, I remember going to Finsbury Park and thinking, like, I'm just far away from home.
Yeah.
Right? But no one was coming up
There was
there.
no threat, though. You didn't feel threatened, did you?
That's right.
And you're right, because Jungle came in when I was probably early 20s, right? Do you know what I mean? And so it was the generation under me that all of a sudden was beefing with a guy that lived in a certain area. Like I used to live in Fring House in Stockwell, and I remember across the road from my estate was, when I mean across the road, the main road, Stockwell where the Swan pub is, across the road is another estate. Those two estates are beefing. And it's like, but I remember when I was living there, I used to run across and play with my cousins in that same estate. We couldn't wait to run across the road. The road was in our way, right? Do you know what I mean? Now it's the thing that, it's like the divide that stops us from killing each other. And that's what I'm saying. The postcode thing, it became rife thereafter.
I mean, I don't. Again, the answer is very complicated, but it's got to be tied in with economics, right? It's got to be tied in with. I mean, that just doesn't make sense to me that we're all living in such a confined space, and it seems that the more integrated we become in Britain, the more problems we seem to have as an ethnic group, as opposed to when I talk to my uncles, you know. It was, you see an ex-black guy down the road, you're going to walk with that guy because the integration hadn't taken place. So we may have needed protection from the skinheads, the NF ones, or do you get what I'm trying to say, or the teddy boys or whatever it was. So it seems like the more integrations happened, the more divided we've become.
There's definitely an element of that. But the role of music and musicians can't be ignored too. And I'll tell you why. Right. If you watch some of the old videos from the 80s, again, we've been doing this with my school students. The soul, the Black British soul years. You know, people like Junior,
Uncle, Put my hand up on that one.
No.
That is
I'm
his
big up
uncle
to that.
on the real.
People like Sade, people like Loose Ends.
Loose ends.
If you look at the way they looked there was nothing ghetto going on.
No.
Nothing at all.
Remote.
And if you look at the people in the audiences, they were suited.
Yeah, they were.
That's so true.
Right, now how do we go from that?
That is so true.
Right.
Top of the pops, they were wearing suits.
But the effort that you make, because I used to go Mud Club and all that. Remember the Mud Club, they used to check you. You could only get in on the way you were dressed.
Right.
So they'd literally go along the line and go, you can come in. Not you. You. And you used to stand there like, please.
Yeah. Best pose.
Best clothes, please let me in, please.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you have to really make an effort. But then when hip hop came in, to be fair, is when I first started raving in trainers, to be fair. Because you wanted to dance, you wanted to do all the play moves.
However, I will say this, and I'm not saying that you was even going out the road, but in defense to hip hop, once again, it was, especially in the 80s, 90s was the best time for sound. But 80s,
Lyrics.
in terms of lyrics and in terms of upliftment,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And
Hip-hop-
educating.
Hip-hop
The
was,
revolution was in hip hop.
hip-hop
was.
was like what
It
Bob
was.
Marley was doing in the 70s.
Yeah, it was. It's
the
Gil Scott
revolution,
Heron.
wasn't
It
It was Gil Scott Heron.
It was.
Public Enemy was Gil Scott Heron.
Public
right?
Enemy were
Right.
just incredible.
Oh, and mainstream
Live.
appeal. But
Yeah.
but so hip hop, there was, remember, hip hop stopped the violence. Hip hop, you had KRS-One with Self Destruction, and then
Yeah.
you had the West Coast with
Yeah.
their version and blah blah blah. So anytime that they saw their communities was getting out of hand, right, they would all collaborate and make sure that was squashed. The hip hop music was very much about the empowerment. Like, you got to remember, Grandmaster Flash, when he did The Message, right, he was actually, it's so weird, because he was actually describing how disco music gives you the glitz and glamour when we're not really living that
Yeah.
life, right? So his thing is, the message is like, yo, broken
is the
glass
reality.
everywhere,
Yeah.
right? Do you know what I mean? Right? But I didn't know that it was a message to disco music. Like, stop trying to glorify this lifestyle that we're not really living. It's really real here, right? But he still, even though he's describing it, he was saying, but don't push me close to the edge,
Yeah.
right? I still don't want to go down the road, even though I'm surrounded by all this madness. So hip hop, even then, The Message came out, I was in Brooklyn in 1981, right? It was describing chaos.
Yeah.
But even within it, he was saying, but I will not pander to that chaos. I will still hold strong.
I think that there is definitely, and I think it's possibly Kunjufu that says that or Marabuti, one of those authors talk about hip hop and say about the complexity.
Hip hop versus Ma'at, Kunjufu.
Kunjufu.
Hip hop versus.
Ma'at. Ma'at, the ancient Egyptian goddess that represents the law.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Explain more, because I'm not.
Well, basically, I mean, Robin could definitely
What's the
explain it
theory?
better than me. But what he says is that when I say that the complexity of it is that, and I experienced it in and of myself, is that when I was in Thailand and people would see me in Thailand, there was all this automatic, 50 Cent, come and buy from me. Yeah, you are Jay-Z, come buy in my shop. And there was this kind of, do you get what I'm saying? There was this, it was a badge of honor. It was almost like, there was a positive PR campaign, whereas a lot of the time we focus on the negatives
That's right.
of hip hop music, and it also, the prettiest girl in the class is usually, I think, it's a black girl. Why? Because of the hip hop videos. So it is complex, because in one breath, hip hop music is a good PR.
For me, it was my youth movement, and hip hop was had a very positive effect on me and the people that I knew. However, I did see
Change.
a lot. I did see a lot of change in the 90s, to be honest, when it
Yes.
did become about cars and bling.
NWA were
And NWA,
forefront for
obviously.
that, 88 and 89.
Well,
they
once
kinda changed
the
it.
West Coast gangster rap came out and it squashed New York.
Yes, it
We've got to
did.
remember, LL Cool J never swore in a record ever. Run DMC never ever swore in any of their
they didn't,
records.
no.
Never. KRS-One never.
No.
Okay. It's when NWA came out, swearing, profanity, and they realised that sold. That everyone and East Coast became very much like, we're losing this race.
Oh, they fell off. Like
They were dead.
yeah.
Let's be honest, East Coast was dead
And
for a while until
we
Biggie.
saw it. We saw it. You're right. Biggie brought it back, right? But we saw it, that the rivalry that became very big, because West Coast. I remember being 16, and I went past Bluebird Records in Streatham, and what drew me in the shop was I heard F the police. I heard the words, right? And I remember walking past going, now this is hip hop. Remember, I'd grown up on hip hop. And I stopped and went, what? What? And I walked in the shop, right? Because it was playing out loud. I never heard swearing in, I mean.
We didn't hear swear until that point. We hadn't heard swearing like that in rap.
So I remember I walked in the shop and it was me and my girlfriend at the time. I said, sorry, what was that you're playing? And the man, because he was a white guy, he made me laugh. He went, it's NWA. And I was, what does that mean? He goes, you read it. Right?
Yes, that's right.
And I read it.
Wise
and I went,
man.
No, it doesn't say that. He goes, that's why I told you to read it. And he played me Gangster, right? He played me that. And as bad as this sounds, I said to my girlfriend, could you buy this for me? Because I never had no money.
I had that on loop. I had that album on loop.
I had to have it, right? But the weird, and mate, this is a good question for you. So now I've gone home and I had to turn it down low like it was a Richard Pryor tape, like, you know, when you're young. I played it and straight out Compton, blah, blah. I know the lyrics back to back, blah, 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 right? Crazy MF, blah, blah, Ice Cube. And I remember my dad walked past and said, what's really going on in here, right? And I said, no, it's NWA. And he goes, what does that stand for? And I said, you read it. He said, you playing this in my house, right? But the weirdest thing is that even though it was huge, violence in hip hop, especially like the way it is in UK now in terms of the street, wasn't like that, even though we had a heavy influx of, because it was the first time we'd heard it. But yet for some reason, because I know what you said about music plays a big part, but yet for some reason, maybe you can help me with this, why is it that knife crime and gun crime didn't rise in such a way when we was hearing it for the first time and we was blown away by it, whereas now, where in the music it's like a given, but yet it's risen in such a way?
No, I think what it is the difference in aspiration, because the time when NWA and that kind of thing was kicking off, first of all young people weren't into it.
Yes, true, very true.
Right, it would have been a section.
Yeah.
And you still had the high aspiration thing of the soul artists who were still suited.
Yeah.
I mean,
Very
even
good
people
point.
like Mark Morrison.
You had to counterbalance.
Even he was suited.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, you did have that counterbalance.
You've got. Did it get any more polished than Lyndon David Hall?
Very
God,
true.
what a classy man.
Very
and
polished.
Maxwell, if you think of how classy they were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, but what's happened is with grime, and certainly started with jungle and it's continued with grime, the whole kind of aspiration has just got ghetto.
Yeah.
And there's nothing to counterbalance it. There's no Black British soul on a Lyndon David Hall level.
Yeah.
I've got a friend.
And the other things as well, I mean, what else was going on at the time? I mean, I used to be a jazz man in those days. You had Courtney Pine.
Absolutely.
He was also on some serious aspirational tip.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What a talent. But the thing that disappointed me about NWA when I watched the film and stuff is actually how contrived it was. It was all so deliberately...
Record companies.
Well, no, it was Eazy-E, who couldn't rap, who realised that the profanity works. We're getting attention, so more of that. So it was very, very, very contrived and very deliberate. And that's how I find most hip hop now, funnily enough.
Yeah. It's stopped becoming an art form. It's now just a craft. That's it.
It is about crafting as many sales or likes or reactions.
Rather than art form.
Yeah.
So listen, because we've got to wrap up soon, but something was mentioned earlier, and I really do want to sort of touch on the whole
toxic masculinity within the black community.
Yes, I just wanted to touch on that just briefly. You heard what Michelle said, and what is your thoughts on, because there's a part that I definitely agree with. What are your thoughts on that?
It's very, very complex. It's very, very complex because a lot of young men who hear the term toxic masculinity will take it as they're being insulted.
Right, okay.
And they're being insulted for doing things that young men are supposed to do. Young men are supposed to chat women up. Young men are supposed to do them things. And if they don't get to marry, they don't get to date, they don't get to reproduce. And consequently, this idea that it's toxic is itself a problem. Now, what will happen is this. If you put the idea out there that male behavior is toxic, it will have the biggest impact on beta males who will agree and who will then moderate their masculinity even more.
Yeah.
It wonon't touch the alpha males.
No, because they'll remain.
Right. And what you then end up with is the dating profile in the black community will be more and more skewed towards alpha males because the beta males will just be out-competed. So in other words, they're not going to speak to women on road because that's street harassment. They're not going to speak to women at work because that's #MeToo. No, and it'll be the beta males that will say, "Me not in this."
Yeah.
And then what then happen is that those guys will just end up single.
Wow.
No, that's what will end up. And then
But when I think about toxic masculinity, I don't think about it as chatting a woman up, because that's one thing, but it's more this kind of pressure to be strong.
But
hard.
But here's the point. Simple question, right? Women out here listening to this, real talk. Do you like nice guys?
I do like nice guys now.
Now, yeah.
Well, there it is.
Yeah, but I'm being honest.
Hello. There it is.
I was honest.
There it is.
I knew the girl was coming.
No,
I was honest.
you was
I
honest.
was honest. At least I was honest.
In fact, bro, I even heard you drop the science on this. The right stuff.
Yes.
You dropped the science on that, bro.
Yes, so true. Yes, so true. Yes, I did. And it's right because what it is that we live in, I'm glad you saw that, but like...
No, respect. I was thinking, man, I wish I had that, you should have had the thing on tape because you dropped the science, bro.
No, thank you, sir. No, you see, what it is that... I want to put it in the right...
And short. I put it short as well.
Right and... no, it's going to mess me now because we...
No, because I admit it now, because at the end of the day, that there's this balance of you do like a strong alpha male because it's opposite to you. So those things are quite attractive because you think, it's quite attractive. It's nothing like me, he's very masculine, and this could maybe work.
But what I was saying with, unfortunately, with males is that sometimes we're strong, but sometimes we don't know how to share. We don't know how to show vulnerability.
And that's what's important now.
But also the flip side of that is that sometimes our women don't also allow us to be vulnerable, right? Because especially at certain times, right, they want, like the program Power, and I won't say much on it, but program Power, I thought it was very clever how initially Ghost's wife, Ghost was saying it's time for us to stop selling drugs and go the straight route. We can find a route out. We've got kids. And his wife is saying, but that's not the man I went out with. You was Ghost. You was the person that everybody was talking. And I remember thinking, whoever wrote this is so clever. Because you would always think that it'd be the woman that would say, you've got kids now, I'm a mother, right? But it was actually Ghost going, listen, man, I look the part. These people believe in me. I've got this business, blah, 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 blah. And the woman's actually saying to him, well, where's Ghost? Where's the man? And we as men, once a woman starts to question, emasculate us like that and say, well, where's your man? Where's the man inside you? And you go, whoa. So then we find that we lean on that pressure and go, okay, that's what you want, as opposed to going, no, actually, no. There's got to be a time where me as the alpha male, I can calm that down.
No, of course, and vulnerability is a good point.
Jumping on that one.
Yeah.
I was even reading an article, and it was a discussion between Dr. Dre and his woman over almost exactly the same thing. He wanted to stop doing gangster rhymes.
There you go.
And then she told him no.
I saw that. Yeah, she told him no.
Yeah,
right? And you think to yourself, like, hold on a minute, like, at what
but
point
you can still say just because she said no, it doesn't mean you have to do it, does it?
It's his wife, though. The thing is, this is one of the things that I think women don't understand in terms of their power. We all know that there are men out there that can treat certain women bad and blah, blah, blah. We get that. Unfortunately, there's a small ratio, or maybe even a large ratio that's like that. But when a man finds his queen, believe you me, there's not much that she can't tell him to do that he won't do.
He wants to please her, and I understand that. But with me, with the toxic masculinity, when a man's vulnerable, I want you to tell me, like, if you're paranoid about something, and we'd have that discussion, that's fine. But when a lot of the toxic masculinity turns vulnerability into anger, so rather than you're feeling vulnerable, you feel insecure, rather than say, I feel insecure about this, that, and the other, what it tends to be is a shouting, angry, you're not doing this, and you're not doing that. That's a problem.
But it is a problem that if women were in a situation where if a man is vulnerable, they will say, yep, okay, talk, cool. but a lot of women will sack a guy who's vulnerable.
I don't know if they. I don't know if they will.
No, but if you
I
were
don't
to,
know if they
no,
will.
If you were to,
don't know
no,
if
no,
they
if you were
will.
to,
No, I think you believe that.
There's a point. There's a point.
I think you
Here's the
believe
point,
that.
Here's the point.
We've been
As you
showed
said,
it.
You said that
No.
you back in the day. You back in the day would have fired that dude. Basically, the guy that would have been his P45.
You're fired.
P45.
Listen, we got to wrap up. We got to wrap up.
This was brilliant.
We got to
Because
wrap
you know,
up.
you didn't say nothing.
Because Jason said wrap up.
No, we got to wrap up. We got to wrap up. So listen. So Robin, where can we find out more about you? Where can we hear more about you? Where can we get more from you?
Okay, my main workplace is Croydon Supplementary Education Project. Big up to the CSEP posse. We run a Saturday school, we run a night school, and we do adult education classes, which would include things to do with Black history. So Google us, CSEP. We have, Facebook, Twitter, whatever. Check us out. My website is called whenwerule.com, and people can see my main book, and it will lead you to my other things. And otherwise, I'm on Facebook. Check me out, and I can let people know what I'm doing. And obviously, it's Black History Month, so this is my busiest month of the year.
No doubt. Robin, it has been an absolute pleasure. I wish we could go on and on and on and on. We'd be here forever.
I think people are going to ask for you back.
Oh, without a doubt. We've definitely got to get you back on, no doubt. I mean, we haven't even scratched the surface.
Yeah.
So, but thank you for coming through.
Big up.
Big up.
Thank you.
God bless you, sir. God bless you.
Definitely for the culture.
For the culture.
Okay.
JBN Comics presents Hair Room. When an asteroid falls from outer space to Earth, a runaway slave finds the asteroid and is endowed with superhuman powers. He sets about on a mission to free his people and change the world. Unknown to him, the very asteroid that gave him his powers carries a dark secret that could destroy the world. Hair Room, the first hero.